Margaret Helen stood in line at Corner Cafe, her usual Tuesday morning ritual interrupted by an unusual weight in her chest. At 62, she had learned to trust her instincts, and today something felt different. The cafe buzzed with its familiar morning symphony. Coffee machines hissed, conversations flowed like gentle streams. Young professionals tapped on laptops, while retirees shared newspapers and stories from decades past. Margaret had built her fortune understanding people, but lately, she wondered if she truly knew them at all. 3 months ago, her daughter, Sarah, had planted a seed of doubt during one of their weekly dinners. "Mom, you live in such a bubble," Sarah had said, not unkindly but with that direct honesty that comes from love. "When was the last time you experienced how regular people actually treat each other? When was the last time you needed something from a stranger?" The question had lingered. Margaret Helen Morrison, CEO of Morrison Industries, a woman whose decisions affected thousands of employees across the country, realized she hadn't needed help from anyone in use. Her assistant handled details. Her driver navigated traffic. Her wealth had built invisible walls between her and the everyday, kindness or cruelty, that shaped most people's days. So this morning, she had done something she hadn't done in decades. She left her credit cards at home. She brought only her expired debit card and a few coins. Not enough for coffee. She wanted to see what would happen when Margaret the person, not Margaret the CEO, needed help. Now, standing behind a security guard whose broad shoulders spoke of quiet strength, she wondered if this experiment had been wise. The morning light streaming through the cafe windows caught the silver threads in her carefully styled hair. She dressed simply today. A white blouse, grey skirt, brown leather purse. Nothing that would immediately signal wealth or status. Next called Emma, the young barista whose smile seemed to brighten the entire counter. The security guard stepped forward. Margaret noticed his uniform was crisp, professional. The name tag read David Santos. Something about his posture suggested military background. That particular way of carrying oneself that speaks of service and discipline. "Good morning," David said, his voice carrying a warmth that matched his smile. "Large black coffee, please." And he glanced back at Margaret, then forward again. "Whatever the lady behind me is having." Margaret's breath caught. She hadn't even reached the counter yet. Emma looked confused. "Oh, that's very kind. But, it's okay," David said gently. "I've got it." Margaret stepped forward, her carefully planned experiment suddenly feeling very real. That's very generous. But you don't need to." David turned, and she saw kind eyes that reminded her of her late husband's. Eyes that had seen enough of life to understand that small gestures could carry enormous weight. My grandmother always said kindness is free. He said simply, "What would you like?" The words came automatically. "Medium vanilla latte, please." As Emma prepared their drinks. Margaret found herself studying David Santos more carefully. His uniform was neat but not new. The leather of his duty belt showed wear from years of service. His wedding ring caught the light, a simple gold band that spoke of commitment rather than wealth. "You work security here?" she asked. At the office building across the street, David replied. "Morrison Industries. Been there about 15 years now." Margaret's heart nearly stopped. This man worked for our company. She tried to place his face among the hundreds of security personnel, but realized with a sharp pang of shame that she rarely noticed the people who kept her buildings safe. 15 years, she repeated softly. That's a long time." David nodded. accepting his coffee from Emma. Good company, stable work. My kids got to grow up with health insurance and a father who came home every night. Not everyone can say that. Asterisk something in his tone suggested. He'd known people who couldn't say that. Margaret accepted her latte with hands that trembled slightly. Not from age, but from emotion. Asterisk they walked toward the condiment station together. And Margaret felt compelled to continue the conversation. Your children, are they grown now? Asterisk my daughter just started nursing school. David said, pride evident in his voice. My son's a sophomore, studying engineering. Good kids, their mother and I. We're proud of how they turned out. Asterisk Margaret watched him add cream to his coffee with careful, economical movements. Everything about David Santos spoke of a man who understood the value of things, who had worked hard for what he had and appreciated it accordingly. Asterisk, that's wonderful, she said, meaning it. College is expensive these days. Asterisk it is. David agreed. But that's what parents do. Right. We work so our kids can dream bigger than. We did. Asterisk the simple truth of his words hit Margaret like a gentle wave. She thought of her own father, who had worked 2 jobs so she could attend business school. When had she stopped thinking about work as service to others and started thinking about it only as achieving? And tea for herself. Asterisk, what about you? David asked, as they walked toward the door. Do you have children? Asterisk, a daughter. Margaret replied, She's been trying to teach me some things lately. Asterisk, David smiled. Kids have a way of doing that. Don't they, even when they're all grown up? Asterisk, they paused outside the cafe. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the autumn air. Margaret knew she should, to reveal who she was, thank him properly. But something held her back. Asterisk, I'm Margaret, she said instead. Asterisk, David. He extended his hand, and his handshake was firm, honest. It was nice meeting you, Margaret. Asterisk, as he walked toward the Morrison Industries building. Toward her building. Margaret stood perfectly still. She watched this man who had shown kindness to a stranger, not knowing that stranger controlled his paycheck, his benefits, his job security. Asterisk, for the next hour, Margaret sat on a bench across from her own building, sipping the latte David had bought her. She watched employees streaming in for the workday, security guards, maintenance staff, administrative assistants, managers. How many of their names did she know? How many of their stories? Asterisk that afternoon, Margaret called her head of human resources. Asterisk, I want you to arrange something, she said, quietly. I want to review the personnel files of our security staff, all of them. And I want to start having monthly coffee meetings, informal. Just me and small groups of employees from different departments. Asterisk, ma'am. Her HR director sounded puzzled. Asterisk, I want to know the people who make this company work. Margaret said simply. Asterisk, over the following weeks. Margaret learned that David Santos had been nominated 3 times by his colleagues for employee recognition, nominations that had never made it to her desk. She learned that he had once talked a distraught employee out of making a terrible mistake, staying with him through the night until help arrived. She learned that younger security guards called him Pops and came to him for advice about everything from marriage to mortgages. Asterisk, she also learned that despite his 15 years of service, David was still making barely above entry-level wages for security work. Asterisk, the morning Margaret finally approached David. She found him at his usual post in the lobby of Morrison Industries. She dressed carefully, not in her usual executive armor, but in the same simple style she'd worn to the cafe. Asterisk, good morning, David. Asterisk, he looked up from his logbook. and she saw the exact moment he recognized her. His eyes widened, then filled, with something that looked like embarrassment. Asterisk, Miss Morrison, I had no idea. Asterisk, I know you didn't. Margaret said gently. That's exactly why it mattered. Asterisk, she sat down in the chair across from his desk. A chair she'd never noticed in all her years of walking through this lobby. Asterisk, David, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. What would it take for you to feel truly valued here? Not just as an employee, but as a person. Asterisk, for a moment. He was quiet. Then, slowly, he began to talk about feeling invisible, about wanting opportunities for advancement, but never knowing how to access them, about loving his work, but wondering if his experience and insights could be put to better use. Asterisk, Margaret listened, really listened, in a way she hadn't listened to an employee in years. Asterisk, I have a proposition, she said finally. How would you feel about moving into our corporate security management program? It would mean more responsibility, better pay, and I think you'd be excellent at training other guards. Asterisk, David's eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away. Miss Morrison, why, asterisk, because 3 weeks ago, a stranger bought my coffee when my card was declined, Margaret said. And that stranger reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Kindness isn't about what we can afford to give. It's about choosing to give what we can. Asterisk, she paused, thinking of her daughter's words, of her father's example, of the lesson this quiet man had taught her without even knowing it. Asterisk, you showed kindness to someone you thought was just another person having a bad morning. You didn't do it for recognition or reward. You did it because it was right. That's the kind of character I want in leadership positions. Asterisk, 6 months later, Margaret established the David Santos Fellowship, a program that identified hourly employees across all her companies who demonstrated exceptional character and provided them with pathways to advancement. Asterisk, and every Tuesday morning, Margaret Helen Morrison still goes to Corner Cafe. Sometimes she pays with her credit card. Sometimes she pays with cash. Asterisk, but she never again forgets to notice the people around her, and she never takes for granted the simple, profound power of human kindness.